Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers tuning in from around the world. And welcome to the last day of Air Convention Digital Week, which has been brought to you by our official partner, L3 Harris. I'm Michael Jonga, your host, and today is all about the professionals that make up the structures of the industry. And this will be discussed in two exciting topics that have been planned for today. The first part of the day will be dedicated to consumer behavior and the changes that have taken place in that regard. And the second will focus on HR and training. Now, during the course of the week, our online networking platform, Air Connections, has been active alongside our conference. And I invite you to join in, as there you can meet hundreds of C-level aviation executives online, including the industry professionals speaking today and who have spoken throughout the week. And while our speakers take the virtual stage, you can participate in our last daily poll with the question of the day that reads, will consumers eventually start traveling without a vaccine? Again, will consumers eventually start traveling without a vaccine? You can find the link to the final poll either on the screen or in the description below. And please do share your opinions in the comment section. So, opening up the fourth and last day of Digital Week, we have Akira Mitsumatsu, Vice President of Global Marketing at Japan Airlines, giving his prediction on consumer behavior after COVID-19. Then Siddharth Butalia, Chief Marketing Officer at AirAsia, will shed light on the growth prospects of the aviation market that stands on the verge of reaching 9 billion air travelers. And to close off the topic, Larolati Ani, the Vice President of Sustainability at Finnair, will discuss the impact of the global pandemic on the sustainability agenda of airlines. And now I hand us over to Akira Mitsumatsu, Vice President of Global Marketing at Japan Airlines, for his prediction on consumer behavior after COVID-19.
Hello, everyone. I'm Akira Mitsumatsu from Japan Airlines, and I'm very honored to be able to be part of this conference and to do a presentation. My theme today is how can we adjust or adapt to the COVID-19 new normal. So I'll start with my slides. Okay, adjusting to the new normal with COVID-19. And really, the COVID-19 situation has been really devastating to the industry in many ways, one of which is that what we know has changed dramatically since the arrival of COVID-19. A lot of information, insights that we have about our core target segments, for example, solo travelers or millennial travelers or female travelers and all that. So we used to have understanding of their behavior, of their preferences, all that we are not so certain now, because the COVID-19 has affected us so much that we think a lot of behavior will have changed as well. And really, on top of the mind awareness is COVID-19, and with that, a lot of concerns about health, safety, hygiene, and all that. We hear people talk a lot about how clean is it on the airplane, and we have provided information on our website as well as how HEPA filters help actually filter the air in 3 minutes. You get good circulation of clean air coming in. But then we also have news about people saying that coronavirus will be with us forever. And it just signals the fact that it's not something that would go away very soon. It could be something that would be with us for quite some time. So how can we adapt to this, well, so-called new normal together with COVID-19? We have therefore started our enhanced hygiene program, which called Agile Flight Safe. It's a series of enhanced sanitation at airports and in-flight lounges as well. And we just want to make sure that we provide our customers with the highest level of safety and to really try to eliminate a lot of worries and concerns people have when they travel, because we believe that it's important to bring confidence back to travel. Actually, it goes more than just about hygiene and safety. It includes things like providing people with the flexibility they need when they need to rebook or extend the validity of the tickets and so forth. I think we have also talked a lot about how the Maslow's hierarchy of needs have changed during the COVID-19 period, whereby it's very much now the basics that's important. Even before we talk about the upper needs that we have, it's important that we first satisfy the basic needs of security, employment, and health. And travel is no exception. So if I ask a question of which of the following about travel is true today, maybe early this year, people will say, well, it is an essential because it enriches my life. I get to learn a lot when I immerse myself into local customs and all that. But today, I think people will have quite different responses. To some, it could still be an essential, that travel is still a very important part. But to some, it's more like a treat now, and to some, it's really something that they would not do right now. It's something that's going to be postponable, that they might reconsider 2-3 months down the road. And to some, it's not something that, for example, they could even afford to contemplate now. And to some, it would be therefore inexpendable. So again, depending on how people respond to travel and how people perceive travel, it's very important that we understand that So again, I think the ultimate question is, how can I adjust to the new normal with COVID-19? I think that we need to look at not just the short term, but also the medium term and long term. So I'll start just with the short term when we look at weeks, months, and try to pick up at early and notice early signs of recovery or warnings. It's important to sense what's going on and then to quickly shape and act. We extract insights from customer survey and comments. We use social listening to understand sentiment, and we use available reports and resources, even though they could be from other industries. It's good to understand what people are talking about, and it's equally important to really listen to customers and stakeholders to understand their pain points, and then to really very quickly try to repurpose our starting with the resources that we have. We may not be able to do everything from day one, but I think it's important to just draw our resources and start acting quickly based on what we can do. And over time, when we are able to find the resources, maybe with the help of external parties, then we start enhance a lot of activities that we do. It's also equally important to communicate what we are doing and not be silent, because people will be searching for information. People need updated, timely, and accurate information, and providing that is absolutely important. And above everything else, again, it's important to prioritize safety and meet customers' immediate needs. But then there are also people who are not traveling now, and that would include a lot of our loyalty members as well. It's important to also think of them and think how we can continue to engage and have a relationship going on, even though people are not traveling much today. In terms of sensing, shaping, and acting, we look at a lot of data in terms of public sentiment, in terms of booking and search behavior on the web. We try to understand what people are saying, what's important now, how that has changed over time, and at the same time to create some forecasts to see when travel would rebound. Well, not fully, but then it's not really, it's easier said than done, because there are so many uncertainties that we can think of multiple scenarios. So the important thing is really to benchmark to see where we are and which scenario is currently unfolding, what's going to be the most likely scenario. Is something we have to look at constantly. Looking at what people say and sensing the conversation around, we picked up a lot of messages. I'm sure it's nothing really that new to you, but we talk a lot about the reshuffle between online and offline, with more focus on touchless solutions. Many things are moving online, digitalization has accelerated, and took a lot of conversation on social media, talks about sort of building up positive norms about sort of caring and sharing for one another. So a lot of conversation is about we rather than it's about I. So it's a good sign, and we want to be part of that voice. Obviously, health and wellness is an important aspect, and it's not just the physical wellness. It's really many things, including not just my own well-being, but also the well-being of my company, my community, and society at large. Obviously, we are all spending more time at home, so it's important to think of how can we then be relevant, and that our value propositions would make sense when people are actually spending more time at home. So it really changes a lot of the way in which we define value. What was important at the beginning of the year may be less relevant today, and there may be new values that have emerged over time that's going to be more important in coming months as well. So in terms of behavioral change, I'll just use the example of face covering. In order for someone to change behavior, I think it requires three things. First, there needs to be a change in attitude. So if I believe that face covering is the right thing to do, because it protects me and it protects people around me. It's the right thing to do. You also, however, need subjective norms whereby people around you also feel likewise and will be behaving in a similar manner. You also need to have some form of control. So if you have, or if for health reasons, or you have skin problems that you can't put on masks for long periods of time, then you might say that, well, it's not something that I would do. But otherwise, if this attitude is a subjective norm and you have control over that, that's very likely that's going to be a behavioral change. And when individuals start doing that, then you will also see a lot of organizational change as well as political opportunity, whereby companies may put in policies saying that yes, it's important that we all put on our masks, or government mandating wearing masks in public places and so forth. So this is just an example to illustrate how important it is to really center what's happening around you, so that you know how to cope with these short-term issues that you have. And moving on to the medium term, it is roughly 1 to 2 years ahead. So we ask questions like, when should I add back capacity? This is a difficult part because in the past we would have used predictive analytics, modeling and forecasting, but obviously it doesn't really make much sense because all the historical data that we have will not reflect the future, which has changed so much, especially when behavior and preferences have changed so much. So it's more important now to really focus on recent trends and use fresh data, look at distribution shifts, and collect data around the new normal. And I think we need to apply more reasoning and intuition to really think through what the changes are going to be and how that will affect us. So, for example, in the past, we used to look at travel seasonality. This is for example, travel peak season, and hence we need more capacity. But I think that has all changed. Hygiene now is a new seasonality in travel. So, as I mentioned earlier on, it's important to look at some of the temporary changes and also to sort of understand what will be the lasting changes. And here I've plotted several so-called mega trends, things like impact for technology. I think this is something that will continue to affect our lives. But for things like counter urbanization, people working from home, moving out of large cities because they prefer to stay in the countryside, or they think it's wise that way to pay high rents in crowded cities. But this could be something that's very temporary, that when we have shaken off the COVID-19, people would then again cluster back to large cities. So again, it's very important to understand what's happening around you, see whether it's something that's temporary or whether it's something that's going to be long-lasting. We hear a lot of people talk about, for example, we have to do more than sustainable travel. We have to do regenerative travel, which is a good thing. I won't object to that. Or we have to talk about visit friends and relatives. How has the COVID-19 affected that? Because we have today like what over 270 million migrants in the world, so roughly 1 in 30 people is migrants. So if we shut the borders, how would it affect the VFR segment is something that we have to consider. I think there is a lot of conversation, as I mentioned earlier on, a lot of talk about building positive norms. And I think many people hope that when we emerge out of COVID-19 into the new normal, it would be a better tomorrow, which will be more, for example, environmentally friendly. It will be more sort of diverse and inclusive. It will be more fair and just society with less income disparity. Hopefully, it would be more sustainable, even though it would still be very much technology enhanced. And the list could just go on. And I think it's very important to have this sort of positive mindset, because we are having, in a way, sort of really a once in a generation opportunity to stop, think, reflect, and really make change happen. But the reality is that with revenue plummeting to really very critical levels now, despite all the things we want to do, we have very, very limited budget. So what's important now is really to prioritize on what's really most important to our customers and the company. If we get this wrong, if we spend on doing something and then regret later that we don't have the budget to do something that's more important, that wouldn't be a very good situation to have. So again, it's very important, and the focus on this is that really we have to, yes, plan ahead. There are many short-term immediate needs that we need to meet, but again, the important thing is we get our priorities right. So the long term is more sort of looking into the future and work some scenario planning exercise. And I think many people will start by sort of asking the what if questions. I just give an example here. What if with wide adoption of working from home, large cities no longer exist? Where will we have our hub airport? Where we plan our hub airport? I know this is a very sort of far-fetched what if question, but sometimes it's good to really think out of the box and try to imagine something that's not an extension of today, but something that's going to really change dramatically. But one tool I like to use a lot is really think of what are the driving force of change today, because then it's not really thinking of the blue, but really to think of where these driving forces come from and how they would affect us. So just on top of mind, I came up with two. One is policies on growth objectives. So we can have, for example, a scenario of an extension of what we have today is essentially a forward dichotomy between economic growth and environment, or we can think of a more sustainable growth scenario whereby we have both economic growth and growth in well-being. Another driving force would be social behavior, human behavior, how people respond to the post-COVID-19 situation. One could be a further atomized individuals where people will be really stressing a lot about their rights to do this and that, and it becomes really very atomized, and it could really turn into a zero-sum game like scenario. Or we could have the other scenario whereby we have more of a mutual universal reciprocity where shared norms will be solidarity, sharing, and sustainability. Well, hopefully we get to the better side, the brighter side of mutual networks of well-being. So with this, I end my presentation. I just want to thank everyone, and I wish we could all fly into a better tomorrow, and that Japan Airlines will always be part of the journey. Thank you very much.
hope you're all doing well. Let me start by saying what a pleasure it is to be engaging with everyone at the Air Convention Digital Week. I'm Siddharth Butalia, the Chief Marketing Officer of AirAsia India, and I'll be spending the next 15 minutes speaking with you about moving the next billion. Despite the bonhomie, I'd like to first address the elephant in the airport. The general industry consensus is now that the return to pre-crisis travel spends globally is unlikely before 2024, give or take a year depending on which side of the check-in counter you're standing on. The world has an estimated population of 7.8 billion. According to ACI in 2019, global passenger traffic, as measured by passengers accommodated by airports, grew from 8.8 billion to more than 9.1 billion. But for 2020, the ACI's latest estimate is a reduction of over 5.6 billion passengers. So there's an immediate need to adjust our long-term plans to the new normal, with new consumer expectations from arguably a new traveler profile, a need to explore where the opportunities may lie in the crisis, and to discover where the next billion will come from. On the positive side of this, disruption is defined by the creation of a new market and value network, typically displacing established market-leading firms, products, and alliances. It's been called the most influential business idea of the early 21st century. The good thing is that the transportation industry, and aviation in particular, is no stranger to disruption. If anything, that's the basis on which we got to where we are today, or at least to where we were yesterday. We're all familiar with the beach stocks that have been disrupted the most: booking, entertainment, airlines, cruises, and the hotel industry. As far back as the 15th of May, the market cap of Zoom, at $48 billion, exceeded the world's 7 biggest airlines. By the 1st of September, Zoom's market cap had crossed $125 billion, more than IBM. In the interim, valuations across 116 publicly traded airlines had been wiped off to the tune of $157 billion. So where's the next billion? Bloomberg reported that in the aviation sector, over the past 3 months, 9 of the world's top 10 airline stocks gaining have been Chinese airlines, with all but Air China posting double-digit gains. The one airline outside China on the top list is Interglobe Aviation, which operates India's biggest carrier, Indigo, sitting pretty at number 6 on the list. It's not that these carriers have been immune to the crisis. They've just managed to recover much faster, owing in part to a massive domestic market and reductions in travel curbs. The top 3 domestic aviation markets in the world in 2019 were the US, China, and India. IATA's revised latest forecasts still suggest a 20-year annualized domestic growth forecast over 2019 of 7.2% for India and 5.3% for China, against only 2% for the US. As a cursory indicator of potential, US rail networks deliver about 500 million passenger trips a year, versus China's 3.5 billion, with an average stage length of 503 kilometers, and India's over 3.6 billion non-suburban rail trips. So how do we anticipate where disruption or the next billion may come from in order to disrupt or to protect ourselves from being disrupted? The future is already here. That phrase was borrowed from science fiction author William Gibson, who added an epitaph: "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." Gibson is credited with pioneering cyberpunk, a subgenre of science fiction, with a focus on a combination of low-life and high-tech, with advanced technologies like artificial intelligence and cybernetics, juxtaposed with a degree of breakdown or radical change in the social order. Early films in the cyberpunk genre include Ridley Scott's 1982 film Blade Runner, based on the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by another famous science fiction author, Philip K. Dick. Philip Dick explores the issue of what it is to be human through the eyes of the protagonist. The distinction being that unlike humans, androids are said to possess no empathy, which leaves us to address a primary dichotomy in the digital future as we envision it. The digital is by its very nature binary, whereas in a service industry where the human experience is paramount, empathy is the cornerstone of differentiation. An alternative framing of Gibson's maxim is the Varian rule, attributed to Google's chief economist Hal Varian, and first called the Varian rule by Andrew McAfee in the Financial Times in an article titled "Today's Luxury is Tomorrow's Normality." The Varian rule holds that a simple way to forecast the future is to look at what rich people have today. Middle income people will have something equivalent in 10 years, and poor people will have it in an additional decade. The manner in which that consumer need is met, however, doesn't need to be fulfilled by a product or service with precisely the same specifications. This is where digital enables the customer journey and precipitates the Varian rule. Let's take a couple of instances of how digital solutions enable the non-rich, or more appropriately, the digital rich, to address the same functional need. Rich people don't wait in line. They have personal assistants who ensure that their car is waiting at the curb. They have the maitre d' who escorts them straight to their table. They have the staff to open their doors. The digital rich have Google Assistant. Instead of chauffeurs, we have Uber and self-driving cars and omniscient apps that monitor, inform, and nudge us in real time. Unlike Muhammad, who goes to the mountain comes to the rich. In the digital rich world of on-demand everything, with the shut-in economy of Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Uber Eats, everyone is either a 21st century servant in the mercenary gig economy, or pampered, isolated royalty, or just as likely, a bit of both. So when looking at the gig economy and the massive disruption that has happened over there in the course of the global lockdown, it's worth examining how the gig economy has responded and metamorphosized to becoming a cross-border, offline to online economy. Along with that, the wide-scale adoption of technologies like Zoom effectively render the traditional utilitarian need for travel rather redundant. So while Zoom's market cap exceeds IBM's, it's worth going back to a paper published by IBM a decade ago, eerily titled Airlines 2020, Substitution and Commoditization, which argued that unlike coffee, which has grown up the value chain from being a commodity to a good, to a service, to an experience, airlines have historically enjoyed a market with few substitutes, but as travelers and technologies evolve, the magnitude of the substitution threat grows. What's worth adding is that travelers may not substitute airlines only with other modes of travel, but by altogether new ways of doing business and entertaining themselves. So, rather than looking at the next billion as a geographical construct, maybe it's time we reconsider the way in which we define ourselves as an industry. Because in our quest for growth all these years, aviation has done a disservice to the core of a service organization, the customer experience. An experience that is strictly personal at multiple levels, the rational, the emotional, and the sensorial. And while we focused on the role of efficiently moving people from one place to another, we neglected that while the consumer's utilitarian view comes from task completion, getting from one place to another, her hedonic value comes from enjoyment and entertainment. So, instead of focusing on where to find and move the next billion, we should focus on how to move the next billion. As we come out of this crisis with new sanitized SOPs and digital interactions, how can we make the experience of flying enjoyable and inspiring again? Welcome to the experience economy. In the July-August 1998 issue of the Harvard Business Review, Joseph Pine and James Gilmore introduced the term the experience economy, positioning experiences as the next category of economic value. Participants in the experience economy intentionally take interactions to a higher level by incorporating many touchpoints in the customer experience to increase loyalty, drive revenue, and elevate a differentiated brand identity. Each of us are defined by our experiences. Experiences reshape our identities, and travel is perhaps the most inspiring experience. For some, it's about creating lifelong memories or developing a sense of community. For others, it could be about gaining a deeper understanding of the world or finding themselves. Gillian Tett, the US managing editor of the Financial Times, claimed that one of the most powerful forms of conspicuous consumption today is not the accumulation of goods, but the accumulation of memories. It is this sentiment that Jacob Gallagher perhaps attempted to explain in his Wall Street Journal article, Why Men Are Wearing Watches That Don't Tell Time, or the same sentiment that is so beautifully captured in the iconic Patek Philippe Generations campaign. And even before smartphones started killing the watch industry, why the Rolex CEO is alleged to have responded, why would I need to know how the watch industry is doing? I'm in the luxury business. Because unlike watches, or the functional needs that a product or service offers, which are bound by temporal vagaries and macroeconomic conditions, things like luxury are always in fashion. Which brings me to my corollary to the variant rule and my closing premise. It is perhaps this hearkening for the past, for the analog and the shared experience that may drive the antithesis of the variant rule. That ironically, yesterday's normality is also today's luxury. This is as true of watches as it is of the resurgence of speakeasies and their success, even in countries that never had prohibition, or the resurrection of the vinyl, the good old turntable LP player, which has seen a growth for 14 consecutive years now, despite the musical climate of streaming and digital downloads. And this has not been driven by baby boomers seeking nostalgia. Nearly half of vinyl customers are below 35 years. 25 to 35-year-olds are the most voracious demographic, taking home a third of vinyl sales. So while we look to differentiate and find what's right for the next billion, perhaps we need not look too far, but to the heyday when aviation enabled experiences and memories that resonated for a lifetime. And while we nurture an ecosystem that may be facilitated by digital to drive personalization like never before, we need to remain conscious of avoiding the Android empathy trap of Blade Runner, to remain differentiated at every moment of truth through the customer journey and across their life cycle. Because the question we should really be asking is not how to physically move the next billion flyers, but how to emotionally win the hearts and minds of our next billion guests. To inspire travel, because that's what the next billion is waiting for. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anne Larilahti. I'm Head of Sustainability for Finnair, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today. Let me share my screen. I'll show you some of my thoughts on the impact of COVID-19 and the sustainability work that we did, or that we do in the airlines. It is definitely an interesting topic when everything changed in matter of weeks, and then again nothing changed. I think there's not much new that I can tell you about the change and the impact on us. We all fell down from the same cliff. We were taken by surprise, even though we knew a pandemic is a possibility. It's just that there were so many other risks as well. But there are always learnings, right? So I wanted to share sort of 3 learnings for me in these times. How to strike a balance in sustainability, how to be a partner, and finally to seize the moment. First of all, it's really important to recognize that we were not alone in getting caught by surprise by the pandemic. It is a failure in fortune telling that everybody participated in. This is the World Economic Forum risk report that they do every year, and this was published in January 2020. And I've circled with red, I've circled infectious diseases. It was seen as a risk, most certainly, but it was not seen as very likely. So in terms of impact, it was number 10. It was the 10th most impactful risk that the panel of experts recognized. But in terms of likelihood, it didn't even make top 20. In the area of public health, issues such as drug resistance, refusal to vaccinate, these were the issues that were more discussed than a pandemic. But that doesn't mean that the risk was low, because you see in the picture, the whole map is sort of the upper right corner of the risk map itself. So yes, it was seen as a big risk. It says that there were other risks that were even more likely, even more impactful. And of course, if you look at the top right corner, it is mostly the environmental risks that were seen as the big ones. And if we drew that map today, it would change, but it would not change that much, right? So the red dot that is circled here, it would move up on the chart, but the others would stay as well. These are still very, very important risks, even though our focus has shifted a little bit and and we're very focused on public health. We're focused on the pandemic, on the crisis, on getting out of it. The climate risk, the biodiversity risk, it remains. And it will wait patiently for us to solve the current crisis, the pandemic crisis, and then we need to be right back on top of the environmental issues. Biodiversity loss is continuing at a rapid pace. 2020 is a weird year in many regards. The Atlantic hurricane season is breaking records already now. And then this crazy picture. The bottom is screen capture from a movie, Blade Runner 2049. I'm sure many of you have seen that. And the top picture is San Francisco 2020 from last week, I believe. With the wildfires caused by intense droughts, caused by climate change. So these risks are going nowhere, even though the pandemic risk realized and is taking our focus. So these multiple challenges take us to sort of the learning number one, striking a balance. This has always been important, no doubt about it. But now more than ever before. We have been very focused on climate, and for good reasons, of course. I mean, we are the poster child of climate change. Even though aviation is responsible for about 3% of the emissions, it is aircraft that are used as illustrations in articles about climate change. Everybody is very quick to remember the impact of aviation when climate change is discussed. So yes, we're a poster child, and that seems unfair at times. When we have industries such as textiles, buildings, other transport that emit even more. So it feels unfair, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take this seriously and we shouldn't reduce our own emissions, because in absolute terms they are big and they need to be reduced. So in March this year, Finnair announced its new climate strategy. So talk about timing. March the 3rd, we started talking about this. And we said that we're going to reduce our net CO2 emissions by 50% in 2025, and we're going to hit net zero in 2045. We're going to be carbon neutral. And when COVID hit, we had to go back and look at our plans and evaluate if this is still possible for us, if we can reach this. And the answer was yes and no. Yes, we will stick to the targets, we will stick to the strategy, but no, not in the exact way as we had planned. We had to start looking at timings. We had to start looking at some of the, or reevaluate some of the actions, how we're going to take them. The new environment brings new challenges. So basically, in this new environment, the climate challenges stayed the same, but the social and economic context radically changed. So more than ever, we need to drive a balanced sustainability agenda. And funnily enough, the responsibility for that largely lies on the shoulders of corporations. And let's get back to this in a minute. So traditionally, sustainability has been described as standing on three legs: environmental, social, economics. And these three they need to be balanced. It's like the three-legged stool. If one leg is shorter than the others, you have a two-legged stool, and two-legged stool is not a stool. That's a balancing act. So you have to have that balance. These three are also interconnected, and they impact each other. Sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. It has been proven that, for example, social initiatives to educate girls lead to economic benefits by helping families escape poverty, and also to environmental benefits, as typically educating girls reduces the number of children per family and reduces the load on the planet. So there's a great positive interlinkage between the three pillars here. However, as people rise from poverty, they start consuming more. They buy mopeds, they buy fridges, they buy cars, which is absolutely right in the same way as it has been our right to do so. But then they're also contributing more to climate change. So not all connections are win-win, and you have to be very, very sort of conscious of these connections. Similarly, now in the airlines, we are discussing issues such as, when you need to protect jobs on one hand, and on the other hand, you need to invest in sustainable aviation fuels. The choices are painful either way. And if it feels too simple to be balancing three legs, then we can of course look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 goals, and under the goals you can find 169 targets, and all of those are interlinked. All of those are complex. So this is nothing new per se. We've known about these interlinkages, but the pandemic has really shown this really, really bright light onto this and made it very real, very practical dilemma that we need to address every day. So balance is really number one. Secondly, I wanted to say a few words about being a partner. Companies in aviation are good at cooperation. We have IATA and we cooperate in alliances. We have bilateral cooperations. We discuss issues with each other. We're quite good at that. But now we need to be better also at these maybe more complex partnerships with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, governments or partnerships with governments, with academia, and so on, activist organizations and so on. And sometimes these types of partnerships they're much harder because we don't always speak the same language, and we don't always have the same information at hand, which makes the discussion complex. Also, often these partners, they have a more limited agenda than we do on sustainability. So for example, an environmental NGO drives an environmental agenda and does not have to concentrate on the full sustainability, such as the companies have to. And this is quite interesting to notice that often the challenges in communication start from the fact that some of us are driving towards one goal and some of us are balancing multiple goals. So not easy, but still very, very important. It's highly unlikely that all the smart people in the world are working in aviation. So it's extremely important that we hear from the others as well and understand what they have in mind, the thought processes that they have, the innovation that they might be able to ignite. And we just need to make sure that we create these opportunities for this discussion, and we share the information in the way that the other partners can understand it in order to gain the benefits from the partnerships. So it makes sense to reach across the boundaries, to find new ways of cooperating. And at Finnair, we take this quite seriously, to the point that we actually took it to our articles of association. We changed this quite recently in May. And basically, we just made room so that in order to really be a sustainable, responsible company, we see that we might need to be active in areas that are not our core business, but they're linked to our core business. They make sure that we can run our core business in a sustainable way. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to bring it to the DNA of the company, which is the articles of association. This is a fairly new thing to do, and I'm happy to discuss with anybody who might be thinking about doing the same, about the thought process, how we did it, why we did it, and sort of the difficulties that we encountered along the way. And finally, thirdly, seize the moment. As severe as this crisis is, it also does offer some opportunities. First of all, scarcity is the mother of invention, and we sure have plenty of scarcity right now. It forces us to think differently. It forces us to look at new solutions to old challenges. It also gives us an opportunity when the volumes are lower. It might be easier to test certain things, to pilot certain things, than it is at times when we're running at full schedules. Also, our customers sympathize with us. They can help us in designing new solutions, find new ways to run our business even more sustainably in the future. So even though we have our hands full with challenges that are here and now, we should find the time to do some crazy innovation, to take the opportunity of this sort of low season, lower volumes, and think that, what can I do now when I have more planes sitting on a tarmac? What can I do now when my schedules are not tied to a minute? To see if there are solutions. We test them now, and once we fly again, we can bring them to volumes. And hopefully, all these innovations are in place, and we found new ways to run our business even more sustainably when we again take off, hopefully in a very, very near future. Thank you very much.
And that concludes the first part of today's conference, which covered consumer behavior, the growth prospects of the aviation market, and the impact of the global pandemic on the sustainability agenda of airlines. As a reminder, please be sure to participate in our live poll. And today our question reads, will consumers eventually start traveling without a vaccine? You can find the link to the poll either on the page or in the video description below. And please continue sharing your opinions in the comment section. I'd also like to remind our viewers about our online networking platform, Air Connections, which has been active throughout the week in connecting hundreds of C-level aviation executives online, including the industry professionals that are speaking today and who have spoken throughout the conference. You'll find the link to the platform either on the screen or in the broadcast description below. So we are now moving on to the second half of our day, in which we'll be discussing a critical aspect of our industry, HR and training. To start us off, Peter Hoxton, the head of training at L3 Harris, will share his perspective on methods of instruction and pilot training, present the current trends, and explain how immersive technology can be used to enhance educational effectiveness. Then to close off our conference, we have a panel discussion titled, How can we assist the global aviation industry staff in staying relevant through and post-COVID-19? Joining us for this panel will be Michael Keating, the Director of Flight Operations and Flight Crew Recruitment at OSM Aviation, John Bijet, Fleet Manager and Training Manager at Air Europa, and Mohammed Atti, the head of station at Auckland, New Zealand for Malaysia Airlines. And now, Peter Hoxton, the head of training at L3 Harris, will start us off for the second half of our conference.
welcome to L3 Harris. My name is Peter Hogston. I'm the head of training for airline training at L3 Harris. My role, not only looking after the journey of our trainees as they come from a license course all the way through to the end of their type rating, is to look at our products, our services, and engage with the development of technology to support our training and, more importantly, support the needs of our clients. Today's presentation, about 10-15 minutes long, on immersive technology for pilot training and operations in the line environment. Notwithstanding the current challenges of COVID and the impact that's had on this industry that we're all engaged in, there has been a consistent drive towards embracing new technology to enhance training. Training that our pilots receive at the moment very historical in nature. It's being driven by generally what's happened in industry. Then there's a new regulation. Then we do more training to try and prevent a repeat of an event. Or at later stages, we are learning to develop training courses that are specific to an airline under their own training program. I think what we need to be doing now, certainly as a training provider, is looking beyond all of this and looking beyond the horizon generated by COVID and the financial impact, and saying, what can we bring to the training world to engage with the new pilot, the new operator of these modern machines, and also help design training courses that support more accurately the operators. So that's sort of the ethos behind today's presentation. So let's look at what's available at the moment. So as more and more organizations simulate the real world environment through what is seen as experiential learning. And I think as we go through this presentation, that's a phrase that will crop up quite often. People learn more from the experience they go through rather than just being told to do something or repetitive training. There appears, and the data is showing, that there is more and more benefit and value of using experience to train people. We live in a world of constant development. Over the last few years, we've all seen how telephones, tablets, and computers have become more and more capable. And for those who like gaming and engaging in gaming activities, the reality that some of these systems generate is quite impressive. And we're looking now beyond that. We're looking at this virtual reality and the augmented realities, hardware that allows the trainee to immerse themselves further and further in a technology that creates a virtual reality for training or reacts with the world around them to augment the reality they're in. And so through immersive technology, we can enhance in training. And I think the key issue generally when we're talking to our clients is we want to be safer, we want to enhance our training, but we want to be more efficient, and we do want to manage costs. The overhead of training is a sizable part of any airline's, any operator's budget, and we want to be able to drive some of those costs out, but maintain the same effectiveness and enhance the client's safety. Tools that can use to augment the flows and the routines that make our aircraft easier to operate, both in normal and non-normal situation procedures, and also enhance the online activity when the pilot is flying the line. If we can train them earlier in their training pathway of what's coming over the horizon, they will be more efficient. Therefore, there's not the great need for line training. So we're looking not only at how we train, but beyond that, how efficient a pilot can be when they start their line training. Surprising issue is that when you look at training, we're still, in effect, stuck in the traditional paradigm. We still use flight training devices, or we've got full flight simulators doing similar things or similar events, training similar events on a training course. We still do engine failures after takeoff. I think there are better and effective ways of training a modern operator. Virtual reality is the umbrella term for all immersive experiences. I know you can buy goggles and put your telephone in and immerse yourself in a semi-virtual reality world, but real true virtual reality will take you to a different place. It will take the trainee onto the flight deck or on a walk around of a modern aircraft, and they'll be able to interact with that machinery in their virtual world. Augmented reality, it's live, a direct or indirect view of a physical real world environment. Talking to a team recently who were testing augmented reality whilst flying an aeroplane. Virtual reality terms, they were in the real aircraft, but learning to refuel in flight through augmented reality. That's exciting. You've thus saved all the money of putting up a large tanker to train a single seat fast jet pilot by using augmented reality. And if we then translate that into the commercial world, we could really see some benefits of training our pilots, not only to operate, but maybe take them on line training events. Mixed reality, sometimes referred to as a hybrid reality, is this merging of real and virtual worlds. We can almost create any world within the technology that lives within mixed reality. It's quite alarming how it displaces your brain and thinks you're in somewhere really, really different and unique. And it will add to that real-time training. We talk about 360-degree video and these games or pervasive games which totally immerse the participant and takes them into a totally different time frame. So this technology is there, it exists, and we're beginning to look at it. I think the real drive now is, what if we are going to use it, I think the danger is we'll use something because it's exciting, it's new. What we really need to be able to say is, if we're going to use this new technology, we need to get data to prove how effective it is before we start translating away from proven training regimes and saying, if we're going to train our pilots with this operation technology to operate modern aircraft, the question is, how do I know it's working? And this is about data capture, and with our partner company, Flight Data Services, are now taking data from aircraft and from simulator training and creating technology where we can use this new technology and the data we're getting to show how effective this training is. And I think that's the key driving forward with virtual reality and augmented reality. So I think that the question generally is, a number of businesses, a number of organizations can offer virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. It is accessible. I think the danger here for any organization in the operating environment is, and I think I sense the nervousness when I talk to clients, they want to see it working, they want to see what benefit it will bring, and that will come through data. And I think that's why, if we look at the last statement on this slide, there is an absence of immersive technology across all our training curriculums. People are diving into it or using it to a low extent, but they're not fully embracing it because there is not the understanding how effective that training can be. Immersive technology offers us the opportunity to make more meaningful connections with users, especially the next generation. And the next generation, as Generation X, Generation Y, the new pilots coming on learn very differently, and they engage with technology in a way that leaves the more experienced pilot of my vintage standing. It leaves us out in the cold. Telephones, tablets, the way they use gaming to learn is exciting, and we need to embrace that knowledge of learning and bring it into our training system. And understanding that variation of learning, how pilots will learn moving forward, and using technology to blur the line between the physical and the real world or the simulated environment, where the direction of travel we should be taking. And we should learn as an organization from the next generation of pilot on how they learn. We shouldn't be forcing onto them old paradigms of learning. And it's interesting, this could change the whole way training is delivered. We've been looking at ways of training decision making, for example. At the moment, we will put someone in the simulator, give them a set scenario, and they will then be assessed on how they made decisions to deal with that scenario. Why wouldn't we use a simulator to do that? Let's look at another way of training. We could use a decision-making room. We could use virtual reality and take someone way off into a different world altogether and say, here's a scenario, let's learn how to make decisions. The opportunities with this technology is endless. And this sort of highlights what we've been talking about. If we look to the left there, the traditional type rating curriculum, we put someone in ground school, there is an element of CVT, we'll then put them on a fixed flight-based device and flat panel trainers. And then the next thing, they're on a flight simulator. We go through a set routine. They'll take their license skills test and then go to the airline for base training. With an updated type rating, there may be some virtual reality in there. There is certainly a lot more computer-based training, but we still are living in a world where lower level devices, flat panel trainer and a fixed base trainer exist, and we're still using full flight sims. That's costly both in time and resource, and eventually in finances. So we need to be doing this differently. What the future type rating, I'd love to be able to say here, it's all virtual and it's all augmented, but I think that's the direction of travel we're taking, and it does rely on data and data capture. They go hand in hand. I cannot give you a training program that includes all this technology unless I can prove to you that it's working and it's effective. That's where data capture comes in, and that's one of the major projects that L3 Harris are working on at the moment. But we do know that we will be looking at this immersive technology. We want to be able to show up next generation pilots what a walk around looks like on an aircraft, all the way through to some scenarios that they may encounter. More and more often now, technology is becoming so advanced in aircraft that when we get into non-normal situations, they may not have been encountered before. They may be something very new, and they may not be included in the standard operating procedures of the airline or for that aircraft. It is becoming noticeably quite common. So with competence-based training, what we are doing is giving someone the tools to deal with those unforeseen events. Possibly, if they're big enough, we could call them black swan events. We can create the learning for that in a virtual world. We can actually do anything we want with a virtual world, where current flight training devices are quite limited. We can do the pre-flight walk around. We do cockpit flows, the daily routine on a flight deck, but we also want our pilots to think out of the routine. What happens if things take a turn where we end up in quite an extreme, non-normal situation? The supporting evidence for experiential training, there's this 70-20-10 framework, and I certainly resonate with this resonates with myself, that 10% of people learn from formal learning in classes and courses. I know as a trainer, quite often when we get into the classroom, we talk about the car park effect, is I will train you. By the time you get to the car park, you will find that 70 to 80% of what we've discussed, in this case they're saying 90%, you will have forgotten. But the bits that you remember, the ones that give you some form of learning experience, you'll take away. It's interesting to note that 20% of what we learn comes from that peer-to-peer learning, that debrief, that moment when you sit and talking to someone else about an event and they've said, oh, I've had that event, and share their learning. That's an important learning process, and it's generally the experience that we learn from. And then there's this 70% is experiential. People are being trained into experience what they want to learn, that competence-based learning, and learning from the environment they're in, the deeper that learning becomes. So in effect, what I'm saying is we spend a lot of money on training, but the real training starts when the pilot gets online. It's on the job, trial and error. It's learning from mistakes and simply learning by doing. So with immersive technology, what we're doing is bridging the gap between this formal learning and experiential learning. Why do we have to wait until we get on the job to learn? Let's use this technology to do more. The Chinese performed an experiment on learning, which included using students' virtual reality group at 40 evenly distributed high school students. So they took it into the classroom. The next generation of pilots, those that are coming out of high school learning now, and they gave half the team sort of virtual reality enhanced curriculum. The other half stayed on standard, what we call in aviation, chalk and talk type classroom learning. What was really the key in this, that 2 weeks after the course or after the curriculum had completed, they wanted to measure knowledge retention. And what's really standing here is that the experiential learners were scoring 90% because of their experience through virtual reality, whereas the traditional education, chalk and talk, the average is only 68%. That's quite a marked difference. And that's where L3 Harris sees the benefit of what we're driving towards. That would be the area, the benefit we would bring to our clients when it comes to next generation training. So it's interesting to consider the future. We've discussed what it means, what it's looking at, what virtual reality or augmented reality means, and how we might use it within training. We are working with two airlines on data capture, how we take data from their aircraft and their simulators and their training, and how we can develop their training programs and how we can lead that learning into experiential type devices to enhance their training programs. L3 Harris is a broad-based, broad-spectrum company, and it's exciting to know that much of the technology we're talking about is already being used and exploited to good effect with our military clients. And this is both at a basic and tactical level. So, and we're using knowledge, skills, and abilities, the way to develop military pilots, certainly in the US, and clients of L3 Harris. And we're measuring those learning objectives. This is really about competence-based. Are we seeing the right behaviors? Do those behaviors enhance the safety of the aircraft? Do they make the operator more effective? That sort of learning is what we will then feed back into what we're doing with commercial operations. And we're looking at biometric input parameters, not quite as deep as we would in the military world and the civilian world, but we will look at eye tracking, and we will start to look at how people make decisions when stressed, or how that changes people's observable behaviors. So at L3 Harris, at the moment, what we're planning and doing is working with a number of major airlines across Europe to look at how we integrate immersive training technologies into their training curriculum and their training programs. It is critical for me to highlight here, this is not just about putting in new technology for the sake of new technology. This is about integrating both your data from your operations, your daily operations, and from your simulated training, even your classroom, and using that data to become an integrated training solution to meet future demand. We are developing technology quicker than we can keep up with. The hardware and the technology is becoming more easily accessible. With that comes a caution that we have to be mindful as an industry of taking on some of these technologies and adding them to our training regimes without really understanding what we're getting from them. At L3 Harris, our whole drive is about using data to develop these training systems. And we're working hard with our military clients and have had significant success in developing fully immersive training devices. Military pilots, both in the basic and the tactical sort of knowledge, skills, and abilities with our military clients in the States. The other critical element to this, and we've discussed this briefly during this presentation, is human performance, observable behaviors. Learning objectives, those that are published and are about to be published by IATA, show us that it's more than just task-driven flying or task-driven operating of an aircraft that keeps it safe. It is how we perform both in normal environments and non-normal environments. And it's about equipping the next generation of operator with the appropriate tools to deal with any given scenario. And that might be something we haven't seen before, one of these so-called black swan events. We're also moving towards measuring biometrics and how operators perform under stress. And if you think shock and startle is a current theme in training, what we're looking at is how we track how the body's response to that sort of stress, and we'll also be using eye tracking technology. But any of these as a standalone is just really a nice to have gadget. But when you start adding data to that, and data to that type of training and that type of learning, this becomes a very powerful tool for the next generation operator. And it's also critical to updating your safety performance on existing fleets. As an organization, we are now looking for new partners in this journey in developing our data technology and our training technology to the benefit of our partners. L3 Harris is asking any airline to reach out to us if you're thinking of taking this journey, taking your pilots into next generation development. Thank you for your attention. By all means, email me if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to get back to you in the earliest opportunity.
Hello, my name is Michael Keating. I work for OSM Aviation and will be the moderator today here in the Air Convention HR and training panel discussion. We have selected the topic of how to help our aviation staff stay relevant in both during the COVID-19 problem and pandemic and post-COVID-19, and how to make sure that the aviation industry actually retains its talent. With me, I have Mohammed Ati, and I'll leave him to introduce himself from New Zealand and Malaysia.
I'm Mohammed Ate, head of station, leading the Auckland Airport Services operation team here with Malaysia Airlines. Been in the role for shortly about a year, and prior to that with various airlines worldwide.
And thank you, Mohammed. And John?
Hello, I'm John Bejet. I'm a fleet manager and deputy head of training of Air Europa, an airline in Spain. And happy to be sharing this discussion.
Thank you very much. To open up here, we have people from various parts of the industry. Myself, I'm a pilot, so if I have the tendency of talking a lot about pilots, please stop me. But we have the biggest crisis on our hands in the aviation industry ever, and this has caused a lot of calamity among people who have lived and breathed for the aviation industry for so many years. In the chat, I'd like to open up with asking the panel, how do we maintain the motivation? How do we keep people in the industry during this crisis? We don't know how long it's going to last. It might last for 5 months, it might last for 5 years. Hopefully not. But how, in the short term at least, do we keep people motivated? John?
Yeah, that's something that we've seen across. Very directly in our own company. I think the worst enemy of motivation could be uncertainty. And I think if this crisis is built of something is uncertainty. Everything has changed. Nothing that was predicted has happened, and everything that we thought couldn't happen has happened. So it's difficult. I think keeping motivation, it depends as well on the background of the industry, and I think that's a strong point. I think we are a little bit used to uncertainty changes, and I always try to teach people that motivation is not what drives achievement. Achievement drives motivation. I always put a stupid example. It says when you lose your first kilo in your diet, then you're motivated, and then motivation starts working. And so I think it's keeping people, good communication, trying to push them and make sure that they get that first achievement in whatever step and difficulty they're going through. So then that motivation drives them to trot along.
But would we be able to help them in that endeavor?
Yeah, I think from, for example, in my perspective in an airline and with my responsibilities, I think what we've seen, we've done a lot of mistakes, I'm sure, but I think we have managed to do some, we've got some things right, and I think communication has been fundamental. Uncertainties is fought by good communication and keeping people, at least with even if it's changing information, but so they do have, and what the plans, even though they change, keep people updated, and I think it's a very important part.
And Mohammed, you're on the other side of the world. How do you help people get beyond this uncertainty, or by communication, or what?
Very much more or less around what John has mentioned. It's the communication and the engagement with the wider community of your personnel, and just keeping the whole team well informed with what's happening in the industry as well as in the organization. It gives them the feel of being involved in the informed decision making that the organization is taking place, as well as a wider scope of how the organization is being shaped in response to this pandemic. So without leaving any man behind, it's involving everyone and not making any promises. And as John mentioned, uncertainty is our biggest enemy at the moment. But again, the first kilo, as you said, it's just that little bit of information, communication, engagement. It's what keeps everyone motivated or keeps them hanging on to something. It's the hope that you hang on to, that yes, we will get through this, things will get better, maybe not now, but it's definitely going to happen soon.
So is there an option for airlines and the aviation industry as a whole to support the staff that's currently either furloughed or may be about to be furloughed? And in all areas, I think everybody's a bit uncertain. But can we, even though many players are on their knees at the moment, can we support these people? Can we get help to them so that we can be ready for a possible upswing again?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's just everything is so difficult. Every single part of the industry is stressed. I think it's not only our industry, but I think aviation industry is hit very hard. I think probably one of the hardest industry, most difficult situation for the industry. And but I think, if organizations did their homework before, and they have solid structures, and they've committed to a good communication, to having people motivated from the start. I think that's the most important thing. It depends on your starting point as well. So I think this will teach us another lesson of not waiting for a problem to happen, but putting these structures and improvements in your organization helps. In these situations when they come and you see the importance of those structures to put in place and working and really working and taking motivation and other aspects very, very seriously.
So do any of you have any tangible support that you've seen given to the people who are either on their way to a furlough or maybe furloughed already?
Yeah,
I know that the states give support. I know that the United States have the CARES Act, and some of them get 25% or whatever of their previous pay, or maybe more if they're lucky. But do you know of any evidence of airlines or airports giving support?
In our case, and I know of other airlines in the industry, there's been a very, 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 very intense talks and not even negotiations, but trying to figure out with unions and with other parts of the personnel, and there has been some helps and credits, and there's been a variety of options that have been given. We are personally trying to arrange of changing fleets to fleets where we have more production to keep people current and making sure we've also trying to get ready for the future picture of what we expect to have our organization looking like. There's been some guaranteed salaries, and there's been different actions that quite a few operators have managed that. I'm aware of even low cost companies have actually saw that as an important thing to take care of.
Yeah. What about you, Mohammed? Do you see that in your part of the world as well? That kind of support?
Yeah, we have seen that support, or that level of support here in the aviation industry on this part of the world, with, of course, the help of the government, subsidies and so on. A small sort of assistance, like a post to other employers, recruiters, and pretty much just advertising your staff, recommending them for other workplaces if you cannot sort of for them in your current organization, it's a very difficult state that airlines, ground handlers, and other organizations are in at the moment. So the sort of support that we can hand out is very limited. But again, as John mentioned, there are initiatives by organizations into creating work for the existing workforce and making their life easier in terms of supporting them with, let's say, as I said, recommendation posts, keeping them motivated with the communications and whatnot, as well as trying to avail any sort of avenue that the airline can do to not let go of their workforce. For example, it can be as harsh as pay cuts, but then you get pay cuts for a month or so, but then we promise to give you the next month the full salary. Or the whole organization will get a pay cut now, but then we will make it back later.
So how do you see people coming back into the industry? Do you see them from your areas? Do you see them retaining some sort of list or seniority in the company, or is it simply we will take you back as we need you? John, what do you think?
Our personal experience, we haven't laid off any pilots or cabin crew, which is what I manage more directly, and we have had hours cut, and therefore there's even people who have had, they're effectively temporarily laid off, because there were some fleets that haven't been flying at all. Well, most of the fleets actually, because for sometimes during the lockdown we managed to just keep a humanitarian flight basically from Mallorca to Madrid, which to connect the island, and keeping to a minimum essential. We couldn't cut the communication of an island, but basically it was one flight a day coming down from 300 or plus flights. So, but it hasn't been a very long period of time, and now we are trying to keep everybody active as much as possible. It's very limited in some cases, or even some people have been still haven't been called to work. But we're hoping that this will be change soon. So.
And do you see a lot of anxiety? I mean, people, I guess you would.
Yeah, there's like is a two-way. Another way, there's a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, of course, and the whole industry is. We are a bus company, and we do have a lot of plans to go ahead, the same as many other airlines. But people are very, very appreciative of any activity they do. I get this continuous. I'm so happy to just do this flight. I've complained so many times. I just feel so useful now. I'm finally putting on a uniform and walking out of the house, do something. So it's easy to motivate once you have something to give, and it's actually nice. It's nice to see people happy, and and people are very resilient. I mean, we're finding, we're extremely proud of our people. They are, they're there. They're always there, and that's very good.
It's interesting that you say that, because it seems like people are getting a different perspective on the whole business now, that they have looked into the abyss. Mohammed, what's your take? Do you see the same factors happening in your part?
It's more of a temporary outlook in this part, where everyone will jump on board the ship again once it's ready to sail. So this is all temporary, and again, everyone will just go to whatever source of income that they can obtain for the moment. Other industries within New Zealand have been operating normally. You've got the banking, hospitality, everything else is going as normal. It's just the aviation that is really affected. So temporarily, everyone's moving across, making their income elsewhere, and those that are on furlough with the hope and the light at the end of the tunnel of coming back to the industry wherever it kickstarts again. So for them, it's more of a way of life.
But are you starting to develop a strategy of getting people back? or do you have a strategy already for getting people back?
It's again the communication, keeping in touch with your team. When in terms of regulatory certifications and that sort of training that's required here, these have a 24 to 36 months validity. So there's not much that we need to do in that regards. But then we've had like small seminars that we do when we go on Microsoft Teams, talking about the product, talking about where the company's headed, and just having that one-on-one chat with each and every team member. It does keep them connected. Also, whenever we have any operational flights, we do ensure that we have a fair rotation on who gets to participate in that specific flight. And as John mentioned, it is refreshing to see these smiling faces on the day of operation. And they would, yes, once they would complain about having to come to work, but then this becomes something, a motivation to push them to get out of bed.
I see a lot of websites popping up now with assistance to people who are in the industry, either with trying to get themselves into other industries, or for the crew, how to remain on top of the game, to how to retain their skills. I know that we, even in OSM Aviation, because we've had so much crew with us, we've started a new initiative that we call Crew Assist, where crew can go in and read about how to maintain their skills. I mean, this is going to be something that we will fill things into to support crew for many years, hopefully to come. And that will not only tell people how to maintain their skills, but also how to get into the aviation industry, because we see that there is going to be quite a difficulty maintaining the people in the industry, and later on maybe attracting, if we still need these many hundreds of thousands that Boeing predicted before COVID-19. Another thing I was going to mention was the attraction of new skills and new people into the industry. In our case, we have schools in the United States and Europe, and for them, we have many alumni, as we call it, from the schools, who just came out and they have nothing to build on. So we've created something called Project Resilience. They can use our simulators at night for free and try to run through the normal recurrent training or whatever they want to do to try and stay skillful at flying. Now that's pilots only, but Mohammed, what about you? Do you see these websites as useful? Or do you have something similar in your organization?
At the moment, apart from operations stuff, there's not much going on for the rest of the workforce. Maybe for ground services, we have like the time that we couldn't really implement much training or changes in the syllabus. We are having the time to do this now, and we are training anyone that we can to equip them once we are ready to pretty much relaunch our operations again. They will be up and running with the latest training that's required for the operation. But across the rest of the workforce, there's not really much to do, I would say.
Much to do. And you, John, do you have a stream that you had coming in before COVID-19 of new talents?
Oh yeah, I mean, the industry needs a permanent flow of people, and obviously it's a technical industry where talent is extremely important in all areas, and that's a good point. This can harm the motivation of young talent. If they see an industry where, you see these bad things happening and see other industries which are more resilient. And as you said, I think people who are starting in the industry, and they're facing this huge challenge that hopefully will go away faster than we might predict in our worst predictions. But I think keeping people busy, and which is very much aligned with that. We need, and it's something that we did during the as soon as we broke out of the lockdown. We increased our training dramatically. We kept first of all because we needed to train everybody and make sure and especially assess what impact this had on the people, but also because it's a way to giving that support for those people to be there and feel. In many cases, we knew that there was a lot of pilots who, and even cabin crew or other staff that on the books they wouldn't need the training, but their confidence was boosted as long as their confidence has broken down, and once they went there and saw that okay, this time has gone by, but I've gotten up and I feel confident now. The motivation rocketed. And it's I think it's important. Training for me, it's a very, very useful tool at this time for many things, for motivation, for keeping people current, and also boosting up the confidence of the people, saying there's. You haven't been harmed by that. You can do your job perfectly fine. So,
and my big question here is, how long will this work for? Do you think? Do you have any predictions of how long can this be sustained?
We are back flying, and therefore we have. This what I mentioned was when we had very, very few flights, and basically it wasn't what kept people active or trained. I think we've reached a level of production, especially in short haul, which we can keep people current. So if things continue to improve, or at least don't deteriorate, and we keep on, progressing in getting, I think we're much closer to getting over the need of drastic changes in our organization and putting in place new products. But it's I'm talking more about my experience in one airline. But of course, as you said, there's a lot of other people out there which need to have this support, which you mentioned, and is actually very good.
I'd say it's always uplifting that at least if one airline can do it, other airlines can do it as well. But that is to hear the optimism that you display here, that there is a possibility. So one of the questions would also be for people who are in the industry and for people who are dependent on the industry is, what if this drags out? Do we have a strategy for keep flying, although it might be reduced, but can we keep flying? Can we come up with new ideas? If big players like IATA, ICAO, can they help us? For example, with people being tested before they get on the flight and we have the test results. Mohammed, do you have any idea of how we might be able to sustain flying even if this gets worse again?
The robust testing mechanism definitely will play a role in the quarantine on either side of the journey, whether from departure or arrival. The kickback we're currently receiving from governments worldwide is that no one has the confidence in the other side's testing capability or the results that are given. So just to play it safe, everyone would be still quarantined on their point of arrival. Tests will be taken throughout their quarantine and prior to their discharge. I'm not sure what is the way forward. I don't have the answer for how governments can build their confidence on bypassing that requirement or even reducing their emphasis on it. But in terms of what the industry is going through and how we can keep flying, so for example, in a domestic market, focus your operation on domestic, and for the international market, there will always be stranded citizens that are all over the world. And this is what's been this is what has been keeping the industry going throughout these past few months. It's the cargo operations, the transport of supplies left, right, and center throughout the world, as well as repatriation flights from everywhere. I can speak for our airline. We've been mostly focusing on domestic operation. We've had a few scheduled services, and then we've had a lot of repatriation flights throughout the past few months from all sorts of regions. Knock on wood, there hasn't been any layoffs as of yet, and I do hope that it does stay that way. The scale of the operation that we're in at the moment is enough to keep the workforce busy and keep the workforce hands-on with their roles. And we're adding more frequencies into the domestic markets as well to pretty much keep our domestic operation running as smooth as possible with minimal disruption to the rest of the organization, while the international operation will have the odd charter every once in a while and the odd scheduled service.
Yeah, well, I can add in my part of the world that it seems that where both of you are at the moment, there are coping strategies that seem to work. In my part of the world, the airlines have more or less shed 80% of their staff, in some cases only 50%, but there is an enormous amount of people who are currently in an uncertain situation and in an uncertain state to whether they have a job in the future in their old airline or their old airport. Well, my last big question would be, can we expect support? Should we expect more support from the states, from the aviation industries, big players like the aircraft manufacturers or IATA, the big organizations, ICAO, etc.? Because in my world, I would say that the aviation industry is so important for the infrastructure of the world as it is today, that we can't be without it, and it has to probably grow to a size very close to what it was in 2019 at least. Should we expect them to offer more, and what should we expect them to do? Yes.
Yeah, I think the first perspective of I will answer your question. The first perspective that I sometimes have to sit down is that this has happened in just a few months. It looks like a lifetime since we started with all this. And if we look back on what the whole industry, science, technology, and our industry has achieved in where we are now, it has to help us be optimistic. Things that would have taken decades before are being achieved in months and weeks. And I think that's demonstrating that science, technology, and our industry, which is very much based in that, it is. And I think the every single part of the industry has actually worked very hard. IATA's been, straight there, putting those guides out, collecting all the information. We had a lot of people asking, questioning what you're doing, and they were gathering all this information. They were talking to experts, and the same with many other organizations. I think the work has been, in my opinion, good, and what I expect from them is to continue with that high standard, which we expect of them, and we need to keep up to those expectations as well. Yeah, the whole industry needs to communicate a lot, flow all this information around, see what's working, what's not working. We've been doing that with airlines in Europe, airlines we've never had been in touch before. We have a WhatsApp group where we keep on asking questions and helping each other. It's been there is a lot of positive in this dramatic, absolutely dreadful situation that we're living, and I'm sure that all organizations are actually working and will be providing very valid information.
It certainly is. It's uplifting to hear you say that, because we hear so many negative sides of it. But you're right. The world is actually moving in the right directions very, very quickly, and Mohammed just mentioned before that in a case where we need to possibly start the industry by testing people, if we have a prolonged spell of this virus staying with society, and it looks like it might, distrust in each other's testing methods is an issue. Do you think we can, Mohammed? Do you think we can find a way through the big players like IATA to do a trustful testing so that we can safely put people back on the airplanes without adding anxiety to the flying itself?
Yes, definitely. That's something that can be achieved, and I'm aware that IATA and ICAO have been really pushing for border reopenings and the standardized or robust testing measures across all countries. Again, it depends on the response that they will receive from governments, but nevertheless, they are doing their part relentlessly. And us as airlines, ground handlers, and all the other aviation industry players, seeing the lead figures in this industry pushing for us this hard, it does give us faith in what we represent, and it does give us that light at the end of the tunnel that we do have the required support to get to where we want. And governments also recognize the importance of the aviation industry to the global economy as a whole. It's just they want to take it one step at a time and not rush into opening borders or not rush into pretty much trusting each other's testing methods prematurely. And then that might backfire terribly on one country or the other, and then, let's say, spike another wave of community transmission. But then you'll have good examples of governments working together, for example, like Singapore and Malaysia opening borders with each other earlier this month. Thailand was supposed to be somewhere in September as well, but they've pushed it onto October. But that's due to a certain spike in their community transmission lately. These countries in these regions are really looking forward to pretty much kickstarting their economy. And so, as I'm sure the rest of the world will be trying to do the same, Qatar is another example where they've defined a list of low-risk countries where the community transmission is either zero or manageable. And these countries pretty much are residents from these countries returning into Qatar. What they would do is they're allowed to quarantine at home for a reduced period of time, which is 7 days, provided they do sign an undertaking and then get themselves tested once the isolation period has finished. So in terms of seeing the world definitely starting to open up, it is happening. Maybe not at the accelerated pace that we would all like to see, but it's definitely happening.
I would say, going away from this to today, I myself feel a little bit more uplifted by that the aviation industry seems to be in such good hands as you guys. There are many strategies out there, and it seems like people are slowly coming to grips with the situation and starting to work in a positive way towards solving this. And I hope that this will give the motivation and support just in itself to all the staff out there that are currently furloughed or in a situation where they might be very soon. To all the new players in the industry, I also think that this gives a bit of confidence that we're working in the right direction and we'll be able to manage this once we get to the other side. I'd say we're just about at the end, but I'll give you both a chance to end the discussions with any input you might have. So do you have anything to add to this, John?
Well, yeah, I agree that we need to be positive if we look back and see what we've achieved in this short period of time. And I agree that testing is probably, we're always talking about vaccines. Vaccine is going to take a long time, and it should take the time that it needs to take. That's a must, and that's pretty clear to everybody, almost everyone. And I think testing science again is going to we already have, a few investigations which look very promising. The saliva testing and fast saliva testing, and is giving very good results. I don't think it'll take long until we have further good news, and we are still figuring out the best options. And but that information is going around very fast. And when something works, it stays. When something doesn't work, the industry is very fast. I think we've also worked not with something into this scale, but this is part of the industry. We've gone through. That's kind of how this industry works. And so in terms of aviation, I'm confident that it's going to be in a short period of time, thanks to science and technology and this new ways of testing and treatments, hopefully also, but more on the medical side. But we will be able to put a very robust system where travel can at least sustain good levels, of operation and managing a large amount of passengers traveling. And I think it's going to happen pretty soon.
Thank you, John. Mohammed?
Completely agreed with what John has mentioned. This is a very cyclical industry where any sort of change will definitely affect the way we operate. Passenger demand is definitely there. It's just restoring that confidence in passengers to fly again. And again, government support will play a major role in the gradual reopening of borders and belief in each other's testing methods. And as John said, the sciences and the way we've been accelerating towards development and just trying to get out of this crisis is definitely leading us into a positive direction. I'd like to think of it that way. This is rock bottom in the industry that we've seen in decades. And the only way from here is up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a little bit more inspired and feel a little bit better now that I talk to you guys. You very often get a little demotivated seeing so many aircraft parked on the ground and so many workplaces shut down. From our side, of course, we're not an airline, but we're a crew management company and many other things, as well as having schools. We want to keep the young people resilient and ready, who already have the training and the type rating, to stay there and remain in the industry. And through our crew assist programs, we'll try and see if we can get the thousands of crew that we have in our databases to keep their skills and remain confident that the industry is going to be resilient and come back again at full speed as soon as absolutely possible. The coping strategies that you mentioned and the possibilities of having a testing that makes it possible for people to start traveling a lot more again is also something that should inspire a little bit of confidence in our staff and our people. But for that, I'd say thank you very much from my side. And as I say again, I walk out of here a slightly happier man. Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have now come to the conclusion of our fourth and final day of Air Convention Digital Week 2.0. And before closing the event, we'd like to take a look at the final voting results of our daily poll. And today the question was, will consumers eventually start traveling without a vaccine? And we can see that from our poll, the voters who were for the notion that consumers will start traveling without a vaccine convincingly scored 62%, with those against the notion collectively scoring 38%, and giving a small reflection that consumers will start traveling without the strict need of a vaccine. Now, I'd like to thank you all for voting and taking part in all our live polls this week. And on our online networking platform, Air Connections, the platform itself will remain open for an additional week, giving you the opportunity to find all the speakers who spoke throughout the week, together with the C-level aviation executives who are active on the platform, and even more from airlines, which includes Lufthansa, Brussels Airlines, Etihad Airways, Japan Airlines, Southwest Airlines, AirAsia, and Qantas. If you're looking to do some professional networking or build fresh connections in the world of professional aviation, then be sure to join in on the platform, and you can find the link to the platform in the broadcast description below. Dear viewers, Air Convention Digital Week 2.0 is now coming to an end, And thank you very much for your participation. And I'd like to extend my thanks to our speakers who shared their insight throughout the week, to our official partners at L3 Harris, and to you, the viewers, for tuning in every day and interacting with us in the comment section. We hope to see you during our upcoming events. This is Michael Jonga signing us off for our final day, and thank you for watching.